Well, thank you all for coming. We really appreciate it. We're so glad to see such a big group to come here and learn more about transgender issues. And we have Kristen Aquist from the Transgender Allies group here in Reno. And they have a variety of events. Some of them are at our center. And you can find out more information by going to their website at
transgenderalliesgroup.org.
So it's very easy to remember. So she's going to go through a presentation with you and also give you plenty of opportunities to ask questions, to learn more. And we've also provided, I think, some surveys, and we'd be glad if you would fill those out so that we would have an idea about future programming that you would enjoy. So thank you for coming. We hope that you enjoyed the presentation and most importantly that you learned a lot. Did I leave anything out?
That's great. Thank you, everyone. Yes, please fill out your questionnaire. Awesome.
All right. As she said, I am Kristen, and I'm with the Transgender Allies Group. We are based here in Reno. This presentation is going to take about an hour. I do ask that you hold your questions until the end. We're going to answer a lot of questions that you probably have. Well, I will, as I go through the presentation. So if you hold your questions to the end, it keeps the flow going. It makes sure everybody's following a little bit better. And then at the end, I will give you plenty of time to ask questions. Do keep in mind while you're listening to the presentation that this is a safe place to ask questions. I'm not going to bite your head off. Nobody's going to attack you for it. I'd rather you ask me than another random person that you meet on the street later. So if you do have a question, please feel free to ask at the end. This presentation is going to cover a lot of things. There are a lot of subjects within the transgender community to talk about, both good and bad. Hopefully at the end of it, you'll have a really solid understanding of what the transgender experience is about, and you'll have some idea of what we're up against and how to be a good ally to the community. First and foremost, does everybody have a pretty good idea of what transgender means at this point? If you don't worry about it. You'll have a really good idea by the end of this. When you talk about gender identity and being transgender, it's important to remember that a gender identity is a distinct part of an individual, separate completely from your sexual orientation. Transgender people are not a more extreme form of gay, in other words, even though that idea is out there. So everybody has a sexual orientation, even if that means you are not attracted to anybody. And everybody has a gender identity, even if that means you do not absolutely identify as male or female. Your sexual orientation is who you are attracted to, versus your gender identity is who you are. You can kind of think about it as your sexual orientation is who you'd prefer to go to bed with, your gender identity is who you go to bed as. And remember, neither of these things are subject to how people perceive you. If you are a bisexual and you're in a relationship with somebody of the same sex, that does not mean you're now gay. In the same way, if I'm out in public, I used to present as male everywhere I went. I used to live as a male. That didn't make me any less female than I am. So public perception of these things are irrelevant to who you really are. And that's important to keep in mind. So what is gender? Gender is a concept created by a society for the roles and the parts that you play within that society. And that does vary from culture to culture across the world. Your gender is how you fit into that. So when you think about what it means to be a woman here in America, that's going to be a little bit different from what it means to be a woman in China or in South Africa. These things are going to vary according to that. And because of that, we do recognize that gender as a subject is a little bit subjective versus it being an absolute objective concept. Your gender identity, however, is unique to you. You are who you are, and how you live your life is based on that. Now, whether you identify as 100% male or female, or somewhere in between, that is a unique part of you, and how you express it and how you live is and should be very much up to you. I noticed a lot of people have a very similar picture on a flyer in front of them. This is the genderbread person, and this particular one on my presentation talks about 4 separate parts of an individual. Your gender identity is up here. Your sexual orientation being what's in your heart, your biological sex being what's between your legs, and then your gender expression is kind of all over you. All of these things you'll note exist on a spectrum. There is no either or, one or the other, for any of these areas, including biological sex, which I will talk about a little bit more in a moment. But if you think about it, especially with gender expression, you can look around this room and you can see men and women who are dressed differently from each other, and that's okay. None of them are more male or female in their expression than anybody else. It's just different ways of showing the world who you are. And the rest of these are the same way. You shouldn't be worried about trying to fit into an imaginary binary that human society has created. Normally when you hear LGBT, that's what you think of. We kind of put the extra letters up there to make a point. We can tack on a lot more letters to what LGBT stands for, representing various different sexual orientations and gender identities. The point of it is not that we're looking for a way to define everybody. The point is that there are a lot of different ways to describe a human being. And each of these letters actually defines very, very little of what a human being is. If I were to identify myself as heterosexual, well, what does that mean? Am I attracted to men with a lot of muscles, blonde men, men with beards? You don't know from that label. All you know is that that would mean that I'm attracted to people of the opposite sex. And the same with the rest of these. It defines a very small part of what a human being is. And we are all human, and we need to remember that. And if somebody comes up to you and they have identified themselves in a way that you're not familiar with, it's not so important that you run off to a dictionary and look that word up. What's more important is what that word means to that individual. And you can ask them that. Oh, you're this. Well, what does that mean to you? And that'll help you understand why they picked that label to represent themselves. Cisgender is a word that basically means not transgender. So for the transgender person, you are a gender other than what you were assigned at birth. For the cisgender person, your gender is the same as what you were assigned at birth. So when your doctor held you up and said, you've got a boy, and you identify as a boy, and you are a boy, that means you're cisgender. I gave the definition of transgender, and it's pretty broad. Identifying as something other than what you were assigned at birth covers a lot of different people. And you'll see a few of the different groups up there that we've put under the umbrella, and they fit in one way. When I'm talking about transgender in reference to this presentation, what I'm actually referring to is this word right here, transsexual. But we don't like to use the word transsexual. And it's for a couple reasons. Transsexual sounds like heterosexual, homosexual, bisexual, and that would encourage people to, again, think it's a sexual orientation, and it's not. The other thing about the word is it has the word sex in it. And we don't want people thinking about our body parts any more than they already do. So when I say transgender in this presentation, or trans, I'm referring specifically to the group of transsexuals, and that's people who will transition or who desire to transition from their birth sex to live as themselves. What that means is going to be unique to them, but that's what that word means. When I said biological sex exists on a spectrum, it does. Not everybody is born XX female vagina or XY male penis. These are things that, for the most part, fit most people. However, the Intersex Society points out that intersex people, or people who are born outside of that binary group, make up about the same percentage of the population as redheads. We don't know for sure how many people exist because some forms of intersex are chromosomal and may not actually generate any physical appearance changes. That's people who are X0, Y0, XXY, XYY, XXXY, and so on. Other forms are physical and can be seen at birth. Most people have heard the term hermaphrodite. While it's an outdated term, it's something that people know, and that's a person who's born with both sets of genitalia, both male and female. That's one form of intersex. Another person might be born with something more in between. We don't hear a lot about it because nobody really covers it in basic biology classes, which is what most of us take in high school. Ideally, when you are born with XY chromosomes while you're gestating in the uterus, your body will be forming along male patterns. Your testicles will descend, that genitalia will close up and form into male parts. That doesn't work that way for everybody, because sometimes when the body gets pelted with androgens, it doesn't respond to them. It's a condition known as complete androgen insensitivity syndrome. The body is immune to androgens. It cannot close that up and form into male parts. So you're going to have an XY individual, born physically female, will grow up identified as female by society. When she hits puberty, she's going to develop somewhat along female lines, tends to be less dramatic, and she won't start a period because she has no uterus. So they go to the doctor, they do tests, they find out, oh, you're actually XY. But your body doesn't respond to testosterone, so you never developed male. And the reverse can happen as well. There was a man in his 40s in China, married, been living his life normally, went to the hospital for abdominal pain and bleeding. And they diagnosed him, hey, you've started your period. Because he had a fully functional female reproductive system inside, but his body was responding to those androgens, so he developed male in the uterus and was born and identified as male by the doctor. Now there's incomplete insensitivity within there where a person will be born with something somewhere in between male or female. Historically, doctors have talked to parents and generally done surgery to transform the person to a more physically female appearance, and then the parents raised a girl. Intersex people are starting to fight back now because most of these surgeries are not medically necessary. There's no threat to being born intersex unless there's very specific situations. So what they recommend now is to let the child develop a gender identity and then do a surgery more according to who that child really is. So hopefully going forward, they'll be more respected than they have been in the past, because it doesn't always work. They don't typically do chromosomal testing to even verify that way. They just said, it's easier to make a girl, so let's make this a girl. And there is a case of a gentleman named David Reimer. He was born male, him and his twin. During a routine circumcision, they lost a lot of his penis. So they said to the parents, we can make him a girl, you can raise him as a girl, and everything will be fine. So they tried. They raised a girl, and it didn't quite fit right with him. He knew something was off, and when he was a teenager, they said, well, this is what really happened. You were born a boy. He started living as a boy, ditched all his female clothes, changed his name, pursued transition. Unfortunately, because the female-to-male surgery isn't as successful, and since he was starting from an already surgically changed sex, it wasn't very good for him, and he ended up committing suicide. But his situation, along with some other intersex kids, has shown you cannot force a gender on a child by raising them a certain way. I'll give you a moment to digest. This is the definition of gender dysphoria. Gender dysphoria is the clinical diagnosis for a transgender person who feels distress and needs to transition. It can take a lot of different forms. It can come in a lot of different strengths, if you will. Some people experience very mild gender dysphoria. And maybe for those people, a name change or clothing change will make them feel more comfortable as who they are. And that's fine for them. And they can live the rest of their lives with very minimal change to how society perceives them. Other people experience more severe gender dysphoria to the point where they might need hormones and surgery to fix their body so that they can live in it. Because that's what gender dysphoria is distress. It creates distress for somebody to be in the wrong body, if you will. Gender dysphoria and gender nonconformity are not the same thing. Most of us grew up knowing a tomboy or a more feminine boy, and those people are who they are, and that's them showing who they are. But a tomboy is not a trans boy who's not quite reached that realization yet. That's a tomboy. That's a girl who just enjoys some more stereotypically masculine things. And that's fine. It's not an indicator of future gender dysphoria and shouldn't be treated as such. It's part of a gender variation, which is very, very much natural to biology. What we have found, though, is that they do have a lot of things in common, and that is rejection from society. Because people don't like people who live outside of what they expect. And it happens more to natal males than natal females, but it's still present. They get treated differently because society treats different people different. Sometimes gender nonconforming is a sign of future variant homosexuality or bisexuality or any of the other categories. Sometimes it's not. Being transgender in and of itself is not a disorder. It's not a mental illness. It's not any of those kinds of words anymore. They've recognized that, and they're moving forward on that basis. What can be associated with trans people, however, is things like depression and anxiety, which are separate from this. Being transgender does not mean that you experience gender dysphoria anymore. If it's been treated and you're past it, or maybe it's so mild you don't have to deal with it. But being trans is not in and of itself a disorder. But how do we measure how many trans people exist? Well, you can ask. However, in a lot of areas in this country, most people don't feel safe identifying who they are. In a place like here, it's probably much more likely that somebody's willing to say, yes, I am transgender. In places where there's no protections and no safety nets, it's going to be a lot more difficult. We do know, based on the most recent information, about 0.5%, 0.58% of the population in the United States is transgender. A little bit higher in Nevada. Again, that could be people move here because it's safer, or that people are just more willing to identify themselves. We do expect this number to go up over time as it becomes more acceptable in society to be yourself. Some things not to say to the trans population. Any words that mock somebody for not being 100% male or female. Things like he, she, it, tranny. These are words you don't say to another human being. There are some groups that have popularized the use of the term tranny, like the drag population has tranny bars. And they are welcome to use that term to describe themselves if that's what they want. But most transgender people do not appreciate being described this way, especially because the word tranny tends to be used while somebody is being beaten. Some unhelpful questions to think about. If you were to meet somebody on campus for the first time, you might say things like, oh, what's your name? What's your major? What do you want to do for a career? Most of us wouldn't then go, are you circumcised? Are your breasts real? But these kind of questions actually happen to trans people. I was in a bar with one of my friends, and some guy came over and grabbed her, and she said, hey, if I stomp my foot twice, come and get me. Within 30 seconds of him talking to her, and I go over and grab her, and we went on the dance floor, and straight up he asked, do you still have a dick? And it doesn't just happen to random everyday trans people. This happened to Laverne Cox on national television. Katie Couric asked her if she had had surgery yet in front of a national population. And that is a very, very personal question. Most people don't expect to talk about our genitals with somebody we just met. So that kind of question is something that unless you really know the person, you really don't want to talk about it. Other things, you might think with the best of intentions, you say, wow, I never would have known. And while that may be complimentary in your eyes, it can be received as, I should have, but I can't tell. So that's something to think about as well. And it's been said to me before by somebody with the best of intentions, and she didn't even think twice about it. And I wasn't offended by her, but it can be something really off-putting to somebody. And what's your real name? A lot of people, when they know the person's trans and they've given a name, it's like, well, okay, but what were you born as? And unless you are a medical professional who needs to use your name for insurance purposes, or a police officer who needs your name for legal reasons, you don't need to know that. It's even like my little kid, his name is Billy. Technically it's William, but nobody calls him that, and nobody ever has. Because that's not his name. His name is Billy, that's what he goes by, that's what he responds to. You'll probably get a dirty look if you call him William. So it's a matter of respect. If somebody gives you their name, that's what they want you to call them. Some of the challenges that trans people face. Depression is a big one. In a society that doesn't accept us, it is really hard to come to terms with trying to live as somebody that everybody is rejecting. Prejudice and discrimination happens, of course, in some places more than others, but it happens. It can make it difficult to find a job, to obtain routine medical care, let alone transgender-specific care. Even housing, you can be denied. Some people will be like, I'm not going to rent to you. Why would I want to do that? I am divorced because of my transition and my need to do so. And I lost 3 stepkids. And I'm one of the lucky ones because I didn't lose the rest of my family. And if you're facing all of those issues, as they pile up more and more, you started in depression because of feeling rejected in general, and then you can't find a job, you can't find a home, you can't get a doctor to look at you. Well, when reality's that bad, some people turn to substances to get away for a while. And of course, as you come back down from substances, then there's all your problems again, and since you're not dealing with them, they're going to start piling up on you. Some of us turn to self-harm as a means of doing something that you can control in your life. And then our suicide attempt rate and suicide rate are absolutely abysmal still. This is the result of a survey here in Northern Nevada in about 2013 of barriers to receiving medical care, either real or something that that patient actually just sees themselves. And you'll notice the LGBT population does have some issues with their concerns about seeing a doctor. People living with HIV, a little bit more, but not dramatically so. And then you look at the trans population in the middle. For a lot of it is when you go to the doctor and the doctor refuses to use your name, refuses to treat you as who you are. Their medical staff will deliberately find ways to say things to you that they know are going to be hurtful. These things happen. I know somebody right here in Reno who, when she came out to her doctor and started showing up as herself, he said, "I don't want my other patients seeing you in my waiting room." It's another person, not here, but it happened somewhere in the US. She broke her arm and went into the hospital. And the doctor took one look at her and leaned out in the hallway and said, "Everybody come here and look what I've got in here." So she packed up her broken arm and went to a different hospital. The biggest thing for trans people when they go into the doctor is a lot of doctors never receive training on how to treat a trans person. They just don't know. In the previous years, there'd be about a paragraph in a medical book during their years of medical school that talked about trans people, and that was it. Now it's getting better. It's getting a lot better in some areas. The University of Nevada, Reno is doing medical outreach on the subject, so doctors can get the training that they need. And they do have resources, but if you're a doctor and you don't have a patient who's come forward to you and says, "I'm trans, I need your help transitioning," they're probably not going to seek out the training because they just don't have any need for it. But about 50% of us have had to actually sit down with our doctor and actually teach the doctor how to provide us medical care. When we talk about a doctor refusing you help, That is not something that's just a neutral act. It's something that is aggressive toward that person. It creates an area of unsafeness where there should be an area of safety. AMA rules explicitly prohibit this kind of discrimination, but that requires a trans person to have the courage to go forward and press this kind of complaint against their ethics board. And who knows, if they're just trying to get something treated, maybe they'll just try to find another doctor. Some more of the downsides. One of the things that happens during transition is that trans men tend to vanish into, we call it stealth mode, where they're just living their lives because society doesn't see them any differently than they see any other guy. It's a lot easier for a trans man to disappear than it is for a trans woman. So trans women end up being the ones that actually get studied. So we lack a lot of information specifically towards the trans men in this country. Suicidal thoughts and attempts, depending on what statistics you look at, they're bad. Some put the minimum at around 42 to 46%. If you talk about a person who's homeless, has no family, has no job, you're probably looking at closer to 69% that they have attempted suicide. Substance abuse, again, that's a big thing. So an escape from reality. And then HIV prevalence. If you have no job and no place to live, a lot of trans women, particularly trans women of color, resort to prostitution. Sex work allows them to bring in money, but it's very unsafe. It leads to more substance abuse and exposure to HIV. And if you look at the number there, 56% of the African American trans women have HIV. The national statistics are, I believe, less than 5%, probably even way lower than that for the general population. The source of depression, now that they are actually looking into why we're depressed other than just finding out that we are, they're finding it's the majority of the way society treats us. The better we are treated in society, the less depression we have. And they found it particularly with trans youth. If they are supported in school, supported at home, and get to live as who they are, they experience the same levels of depression and only slightly elevated anxiety above their peers. So if they are allowed to be themselves and they're accepted as that, they are just like anybody else as far as depression and anxiety go. You take those sources of safety away, they resort to substance abuse, sex for acceptance, homelessness. They're often kicked out. Remember, the trans population of the United States is somewhere around 0.6% that we know of, but we know that in large cities like Chicago, trans youth make up about 18% of the homeless population. And several of us get murdered, unfortunately, and it's majority trans women of color. Last year was another record. I think we hit 25, 26 trans women killed. A couple were trans men. This year we're on target to beat that number again. Here's a fun thing. Think about everything that you have in your life that has your name on it, or even your gender on it. Anybody in here change their name due to marriage? So, you get to go around, you get to change your driver's license, you get to change your, maybe your mortgage bill, your insurance stuff. You go and on and on and on and all these things, but you tell that person, oh, I got married, and they're excited for you. It's a little bit of a stretch when you're saying, well, yeah, it says Robert, I need it to say Jenny, and they go, wait, what? But going through all these things, after about 2 years, I finally got around to emailing Netflix back and saying, you need to change my name on your records. It took me 2 years to get around to it. I just wasn't thinking about it. But each time you do it, it's a little bit more of a success. You have another thing in your name identifying you as who you are, and it just feels so much better. But especially for adults, there's a lot of things that have your name on them, and a lot of companies have a lot of different policies on how to go and do that. Hormones. One of the biggest parts of transition is getting on hormones. And what that means is a little different for the men and the women. For a trans man to get on hormone therapy, that's the introduction of testosterone. Testosterone tends to override estrogen really easily. It's a very, very strong hormone. And that will create masculinizing effects. For the trans woman, you have to first block testosterone, or estrogen won't really do a whole lot. And then once you get that introduced, then feminizing effects start to appear. Not everybody wants hormones. Remember when I was talking about gender dysphoria, not everybody feels the levels that transition requires them to undergo hormone therapy. But for those that do, it's very, very important that they see an actual doctor or an endocrinologist, somebody who knows what they're doing, because there are side effects. While hormone therapy is generally safe, there can be individual side effects that can affect whether or not you can continue, and you need those monitored by a doctor. A lot of people in bad areas or the areas without insurance coverage will buy their hormones online, and that is unsafe. They don't know the dosages very well, and they go to the internet to find answers, and they don't know how their body's responding. Everybody's body responds a little bit differently to hormones. Here are some of the effects of HRT for men. You tend to grow a beard. Your voice deepens. At certain ages, you may develop an Adam's apple. That's one of the side effects of testosterone in puberty. You can probably develop a different body odor. You'll be able to build muscle much more easily, and your body hair will thicken. A lot of trans guys do get acne as well. It can stop the menstrual cycle. It most often does, but I can never guarantee. But all the effects to see maximum change is going to be about 5 years. For trans women, there's a lot of changes that go on here as well. There's a lot of things that it won't do. Facial hair doesn't go away. In order to get rid of it, you have to get electrolysis or laser hair removal, and both are painful, I can personally attest. You lose that ability to develop those muscles really easily. You may lose a lot of energy, lose sex drive. Trans men tend to gain the sex drive that we lose. There will be some level of atrophy within the testicles. They will shrink. And then erectile dysfunction is probably going to follow. And then male pattern baldness may reverse a little bit. Depends on why it's caused. If it's from the byproduct of testosterone, it can reverse a bit. If it's simply genetic, then it probably won't. Children, most importantly, children do not medically transition. They do not get hormones. They do not get surgeries. They can dress according to who they are. They can hear a name that fits who they are. But that's pretty much it. They get that social recognition. They get to live as themselves. It's completely, totally, and utterly reversible. For adolescents, as you approach puberty, humans have discovered how puberty actually works. And we discovered how to stop it because of children who went through, it's called precocious puberty, and it tends to start around age 5. So they put these puberty blockers in, and it confuses the body and stops the body from producing the sex hormones. So puberty stalls. And it remains stalled until those puberty blockers are removed. Now for the child under precocious puberty, when they hit the age where their peers start developing, then they can be removed and their puberty will resume. For the trans child, it can be introduced at the start of puberty to prevent all of those changes that would happen if they were to continue. And it gives them time to be properly evaluated by a doctor and by their therapist and make sure that this is the right thing for them. If they decide transition is not the right thing, those puberty blockers are removed, they undergo their normal puberty. If it is the right thing for them, right now the recommendation is at the age of 16 they can start cross-sex hormone therapy. So they can start getting the puberty that they believe and truly hold dear that they should have. And that allows them much more freedom to live their lives stealth, if you prefer, or without all those side effects that have to be reversed either through surgery or expensive and painful medical treatments. There are some kids like Jazz Jennings, if you've heard of her. She started hormones, I think, at the age of 13. She'd been consistently identifying herself as Jazz since around the age of 5. So her doctors felt comfortable introducing her to the hormones. And for kids, if you're 15 years old and all your friends started puberty at 9 and 10, you're going to feel a little awkward because you're still got a fairly androgynous body while all your friends are developing. Surgery is for adults. While some doctors will do top surgery for a long time, very thoroughly accepted trans boy, they're not going to do any other surgeries. There's no sex reassignment surgery or gender confirmation surgery. These are all the same thing. Nobody gets bottom surgery before adulthood. It is, for trans women, a very, very successful surgery. A lot of sensation is maintained. It is very much a usable, natural-looking organ when you're done. The vagina looks and feels very much like it should. Unfortunately for trans men, it is a much more difficult surgery. It's easier to make a cave than a tower. So building up from tissue that can't be separated without losing all that sensation just doesn't provide as much to work with. And they don't have currently the technology to replicate everything that goes into the penis. So a lot of trans men opt not to get this surgery. For a trans woman, bottom surgery runs anywhere from about $25,000 to $40,000, depending on where you go in the country and which doctor you see. For a trans man to get the surgery, it's usually about 2 to 3 surgeries, and it costs upward of $100,000, which is another reason why they don't get it. Trans men tend to get top surgery, trans women tend to get bottom surgery. Insurance coverage also helps make that determination. A lot of trans people don't have coverage for this operation, and they have to find a way to save up and pay out of pocket. A lot of big companies have come around and are offering this on their insurance plans now. I believe we've actually broken the halfway mark on the Fortune 500, that most of them are starting to offer this because they're seeing it as a good thing. All of your big tech companies offer this. It's not for everyone. Not everybody requires surgery to feel at home inside themselves, and that's fine. Not everybody needs to have surgery. You don't have to sign up for surgery to be transgender. What they have found is that patient acceptance of the surgery is very, very high. Over 90% of patients are very much happy with their surgery. Of course, there is some level of regret, but it's a very, very small percent. What's most important is proper follow-up with your doctor afterward, and if necessary, with a therapist. What they have found is that as social acceptance increases, any downsides of existing as a trans person drop off, and surgery helps that. It tends to resolve gender dysphoria perfectly. When you decide to transition, there's a lot of things to consider. You have to consider, how your family, friends, your coworkers are going to respond to it. And you have to be ready for those people to have questions, to just not be familiar with anything that goes on there. It's new to them, and they have an adjustment period, and it's important to remember that. But what does transition mean? And that's something you need to think about as you approach transition. How am I going to do my hair? Am I going to wear makeup? How am I going to dress? Now, when you're 14 as a girl, and you overdo your makeup, and you walk out the door, society's pretty forgiving. They know it's a thing that a lot of people go through. They're just not experienced with it yet, and you'll get better over time. When you're in your 60s and you overdo your makeup, society is not so forgiving. Finding treatment is very, very important. Some people were able to grab one of our Northern Nevada resource guides. We have a lot of resources in this area that are great at accepting trans people. If you weren't able to grab a guide and you need one, you can get one from our website. Social support is equally important. Finding groups of people that you fit in with is very, very valuable. And then don't forget your family members and your friends. They might need support. Support groups can help them. A lot of parents feel a sense of loss when their child comes out because they had plans for their little boy or their little girl to do certain things in life, and now they think those plans are completely destroyed, and that's the loss that they feel. And that's okay. people feel loss. If you've had a family history of every male becoming a doctor for generations, and then suddenly Junior decides he wants to be a musician, parents feel a loss there too. Anytime something is going to be different than what they've been thinking about, there's that sense of, well, now I need to redo everything that I've been thinking about with this child. Transgender care didn't come out of nowhere. Has everybody heard of the Kinsey report? Where Kinsey figured out that not everybody was necessarily 100% heterosexual or homosexual. There's a lot of in between. From that, over time, they started recognizing that there's variations in gender. And Harry Benjamin, who did some less than positive things in his life, but for this part, he helped recognize the differences and variations in people's gender. And from that, came to where we are now with the WPATH Standards of Care, which is on version 7. Right now they're working on version 8, which establishes a nice, orderly way of helping a patient transition. It tells the doctors how to do hormones, side effects to watch out for, how to increase dosages, things like that. If you are interacting with a trans person, the number one most important thing you can do is provide respect. Just like with my little boy, he wants to be called Billy. It's respectful to call him Billy. If a trans person says, you've known me forever as Mark, I'd like you to call me Rebecca now, it's respectful to call her Rebecca and to use those pronouns. Keeping in mind that transition is a very, very long-term process, helping keep that trans person patient as they go through everything can be very, very important. Some people tend to expect, well, I just did my first shot of hormones. Where's my boobs? Where's my big muscles? These things don't happen right away, and they didn't happen for anybody going through puberty. But it's hard to keep that in mind when you're excited about you get to move forward as yourself and all these wonderful things are going to happen. You got to rein it in a little bit and make sure that if you see bad things starting to happen, depressed moods, or they're getting mistreated, it's important to check in with them and make sure that they're getting the proper care that they need. So respect. We can all work to bridge these barriers to care, helping society realize that trans people are just people. We have slightly different needs, but hey, everybody has slightly different needs. We need to make sure, and we're working on it, making sure that everybody's getting individual treatment. A trans person is not a shelf that you've bought at IKEA. Not every person is going to get the sides here and the shelves here and the back on, and then it's done. Everybody needs to have their process evaluated on an individual basis. And we do need more research. It's become a much more interesting and important topic for people to look at in the scientific community, but it's new. And there's a lot of things we still don't know on the scientific level. If you are, or if you know a medical professional who needs access to the proper information on how to approach treatment, these are available. The WPATH Standards of Care are actually available to download for free on the internet. I've got my own copy in my phone, in case I need a reference. The latest textbook on pediatrics covers trans children. If you would like more information, including this presentation, it is available on our website at transgenderalliesgroup.org. You can also email us if you have a question that you are uncomfortable asking in public. You can write to us at info@transgenderalliesgroup.org or use our contact page, and we will get back to you most likely within 24 hours unless you come up with something new and unique, which would be very difficult, but you're welcome to, in which case it might take a little bit longer. At this point, do we have any questions? Keeping in mind, this is a safe place to ask your question. Nobody. Yes?
You said at the beginning, if you have sex with someone of the same gender or sex, you're not necessarily gay. Does it mean, coming from the medical field, when we studied, some disease you call homosexual if you have sex with someone the same sex.
Right.
So is this any different?
Well, you got to separate the act from the person.
Yeah.
it might be a homosexual act, but they've started referring in the medical community to men who have sex with men as men who have sex with men rather than homosexual men. Because a bisexual man could be with a man today and break up and then start going out with a woman the next day. It wasn't that he's gay before and now he's straight. It's that he is who he is, and he was in a gay relationship, now he's in a straight relationship. And it's important to make that distinction because we put on somebody that label when we see them with another person, and there's a lot of, oh, so you're gay now. Oh, so you're straight now. And that doesn't really encompass who they are. They're looking at the relationship and defining the person when they need to separate the relationship or the act from the individual. So a bisexual person is remaining bisexual regardless whether they're with a man or a woman, and just like a person can be having sex with somebody that they're not generally attracted to that group. Maybe that guy that they had sex with is the only guy they've ever felt sexual attraction to, and for the rest of it, they're sexually attracted to women. So keeping in mind, sexual orientation is a very, very diverse, complex subject. It's not easily boiled down into simple, neat boxes. Yes?
Is there a point in time where it's detrimental to stay on hormones, or can you just do it indefinitely?
That would be an individual concern, something for their doctor to be checking out. Once you've reached a certain point in medical transition, if you've had certain surgeries, the hormones become necessary. Some level of hormones are required in the body. So an individual who's post-op from bottom surgery has to have some level of hormones in their system. That's why postmenopausal women tend to be put on some level of hormones to help prevent things like osteoporosis and other diseases that can pop up just because the body expects these things to be there. So with trans people, if they've gotten to that point, they need to be on some level of hormones, but that level that they're on can be adjusted based on their individual needs. So if they've reached a point where some trans men develop polycystic ovarian syndrome after being on testosterone, and that can be something that causes the doctor to reduce or eliminate testosterone from their transition, that is something that's going to have to be evaluated individually. Yes?
I'm a writer, and if I'm interviewing someone and I'm not sure of the pronoun, is it respectful to ask them which pronoun they prefer?
The best way to ask them is what pronoun do they use,
Oh, okay.
because the idea that they just prefer it is offensive to some people. So if you want to ask what pronoun do you use or what are your pronouns, would be the best way to approach.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Now, I know
Yes.
there's a whole bunch going on that I referred to when I introduced you. You know, my partner attends some of the meetings that the Transgender Allies group has. Would you mind mentioning a couple of those things that are happening? I know that there's like a group of you go out and do things. And
Yes. Right now, our main focus for a couple of our board members is the legislature. If you haven't heard, there are a few LGBT bills in the legislature this year. They are positive at this point. There's an adjustment to, let's see, what is it? The foster parenting that they're looking at right now. One of the bills is about foster parents getting properly educated as to how to work with LGBT children, making sure that if a child comes out and gets placed with a foster family, that they know how to handle any issues that are coming up and how to deal with them respectfully. And that's one of the big bills that is in the legislature right now. The other one is escaping me at the moment. SB 110, is the name of it. I don't remember what it is. It passed the Senate. It's moving into the House. And this is why I don't go to the legislature. I don't know the players, and I can't keep track of the bills. What is SB 110? It's trans-specific. I remember that much. But, so we have some people down there working with the bills, working with the legislature, trying to get these certain things through. And right now, because of the makeup of the legislature, we're not having a whole lot of opposition. And it's been very, very open and welcoming, which has been a wonderful thing. And then we also have, well, a few of us do these presentations at various different, whether it's government agencies or businesses that want to be more accepting. We've been to places like Crisis Call Center. We've been to the foster parenting, like the social services group. We've been to schools to talk to the teachers. Anywhere that invites us in, we are happy to go and talk, just so that we can make sure that if trans people need their services, then they know how to handle them properly. And we also work with medical organizations and insurance companies trying to increase coverage for trans people. Yes?
I just looked it up, SB 110, because I remember hearing that too.
Yes.
Exempts from the publication requirement, a court order change of name if the reason for the change is to conform the person's name to his or her gender identity.
Yes, and that is important because even for children, when you do go to change your name and you get to face that diagram of different companies, your information gets published in the newspaper. And it's not just that Greg is changing his name to Barbara. It's that Greg is changing his name to Barbara, and lo and behold, there's his address and phone number in case you're looking for them. So it's outing. It creates a sense of danger and vulnerability. And when I changed mine, yeah, it was right there in the Sparks Tribune, just a picture of my form, my notice of name change, which had my address and phone number. And I've moved from there since then, and nothing happened to me personally, but I do know one person whose neighbor found out and came over and threatened her. So we're trying to remove that publication process, which currently exists if you've been in a domestic violence situation and fear for your safety, if the person finds out who you are and what you're doing and where you live. So we're just trying to extend that exemption to other people.
So I work in financial aid, and as you know, the federal laws have not caught up with current times. So if we have a person who, a trans male, who goes to the selective service match, they won't match. They won't pass the match because they were born a female and they weren't required to register. So we then, it's horribly invasive, and it's so difficult for some folks to have to go through this because they've had to go through so much. They have to ask for their birth certificate. They have to prove that they were born a female. That is currently the federal government's only way for us to lift that hold on their financial aid. So we explain just what I told you. That's how we explain it. And usually it's fine, but it's so hard. Do you have any other advice for how we can handle it?
That's a tough one, because that's one of those steps that's going to be either very unaffirming of who they are or just completely detrimental to their experience, because I had to register for selective service. And, you know, it really wasn't a whole big deal to me at the time, but I could see how it'd be a really big deal to a trans man that, you know, they're a guy who doesn't have to apply for selective service because they're not recognized as a guy. And that lack of recognition is part of the problem. It sounds like you're handling it pretty well, being upfront with the reasons for having to ask. Just, I guess, be ready to be sympathetic if that person has a breakdown over it, because they very well could, depending on how important it is to them. And depending on where they're coming from, that could really be interesting, because some states don't require as many steps to change a birth certificate, like here in Nevada. So the federal government might be thrown for a loop a little bit with that. Anybody else? Yes.
That a bunch of Fortune 500 companies were becoming supportive of allowing insurance to pay for things, but how does that work? I mean, what if the insurance doesn't work? I mean, in some places, probably the insurance says, no, it's elective surgery, rather than, so how do you know how they determine whether it's somebody just deciding, hey, I want to do this, or this is really, psychologically and physically something I need?
When you are talking about the big surgeries, whether it's for a trans man top surgery or for either one of them bottom surgery, WPATH standards of care require letters from your therapist before the doctors will perform these surgeries. For top surgery, it's one letter. You have to have a therapist that you've been seeing who can certify that, yes, this is what's right for you, it's something that they've evaluated over time, and it's a source of dysphoria for the patient. And the doctor can look at that, and it's a very long list of details that they expect out of it. And that letter can be used for insurance as well, to say, this is our proof that this patient has a medical need for this operation. Now, for the bottom surgery, it's 2 letters. Usually the primary has to make sure that all of those steps are covered, and the secondary has to sign off that, yes, everything that they said is correct from my experience with this patient, and I also recommend that this is a proper surgery for them. And those letters can go to the insurance company as part of the approval process. But those doctors aren't going to do those surgeries without them. So there's not going to be an, oh, I feel like getting it cut off today and running off and having insurance pay for it. There is a very specific set of guidelines. Yes.
So with this being at a college, could you think of a couple best practices or suggestions that you have on how we can all make TMCC an inclusive, trans-inclusive environment?
Well, I believe your bathrooms are open to trans people, if I'm not mistaken. So trans people can use the proper bathrooms here. And while that covers binary trans people, one of the things to consider is non-binary people. They may not feel comfortable in a gendered bathroom, even if they pass as one or the other on a regular basis. It might be something, if there's a gender-neutral facility available, that makes them more comfortable. It might make a trans person who's feeling really awkward that day more comfortable. It might even make a cis person feel better knowing that there's a private bathroom that they can go to. People's comfort levels over bathrooms is very much a variation from person to person. And that gender-neutral facility can be one of those things that just allows everybody to feel more at home and at peace. One of the other things that I've seen pressed that you might want to rethink is a lot of people have the idea that you could introduce yourself and give your pronouns and that everybody would feel more comfortable because then everybody knows what pronouns to use for everybody. Well, not every individual is ready to use those proper pronouns yet, and they may not feel comfortable giving the wrong ones, even though they're presenting that way. Or they may not feel comfortable admitting that they use the they-them pronouns. So I would be careful as to approaching things like that, and I know it's been a big movement in certain campuses across the country to introduce, give pronouns, and then ask the same of somebody else, particularly in a group setting. It can be very unsettling. So things like that to keep in mind. Student IDs tend to be pretty acceptable to use somebody's name even if it's not their legal name, and that's helpful. Other than that, it's just making sure professors are aware and can make use of that name rather than necessarily what's on their official student records.
So what are your suggestions for the pronoun?
If you are really interested in finding somebody out, you can ask. If they are hesitant, make sure that they know that they don't have to give them. But something like going around in a room where you'd say, introduce yourself, give your pronouns, that might make people very much uncomfortable because it puts them in the position of, well, I'm not ready to give my real ones, but I don't want to give these fake ones. And they'd prefer even if they just let people assume and then they could, correct later. So it's touchy, but when you're dealing with individuals, of course, everything is going to be a little different on a case-by-case basis. Mm-hmm. And like I said, feel free to use our contact form or that email address if you have a question later, or if you have a friend who has a question later, they can reach out. We will get back to people as fast as we can.
I just was thinking about this. Is it hard for like trans people to get like a job or something?
Well, here we do have employment protections for what that's worth. So you cannot be not hired or fired just for being transgender. They can't at least state that. Now, of course, women routinely get not hired for jobs because they're pregnant, because employers don't want to deal with it, they just don't say it. But as far as I know, there are a lot of companies here locally that are very much accepting. Like I said, all the big tech companies are accepting. Starbucks, fast food industry. I mean, for what it is, it's a job, and it can help build your resume, and then you can make sure that the next job you get is on your merits. But Walmart and Target, Walmart less publicly, but they are as accepting pretty much as Target is. So there's a lot of places here that are very much open to hiring people. You're welcome. We do have employment protections under the law, as well as housing and a variety of others, but
Any closing thoughts?
thank you for all coming and listening to me today. I hope you learned some information that can help. If you see somebody getting harassed for being different, that if you feel comfortable doing so, please speak up. It means a lot if somebody's there, and it tends to diffuse situations, because silence tends to be received as affirmation for what the person's doing. So if you feel comfortable, again, if you don't feel comfortable, then maybe go get somebody who might be. But please don't just let people get harassed, whether it's for gender identity, sexuality, race, religion reasons. Make sure that people feel safe where they are.